Hello, today our class is on correlation, proper correlation. First we will see, okay, introduction of correlation. In the earlier chapters we have discussed the descriptive statistics which describe the quantitative characteristics of the data. The scope of those was strictly confined to various values of one variable only. For example, you take measures of central tendency, measures of dispersion, measures of skewness. Okay, deals with the various values of single variable, right? These statistical measures are useful for comparison and analysis. Okay, but they are not useful in finding out the quantitative relationship between the variables. Okay, in our practical life, that means in our daily life, we come across different sets of data that deals with more than one variable which are interrelated and interdependent. Example, there is close relationship between a price of a commodity and quantity demanded, capital invested, and profits earned, advertisement expenditure and sales generated, yield of paddy and amount of rainfall and fertilizers used are the examples. Further, the changes in the quantity of one variable are accompanied by the quantities of other variables. And this is referred to as covariation. Okay, quantification of such interrelations and covariation between different sets of data necessitates, okay, the use of analytical statistics. Correlation analysis is such an analytical statistical measure that helps in finding out the uh, direction and extent of relationship between two or more variables, right? The measure of correlation, known as correlation coefficient or correlation index, summarizes the direction and degree of correlation in one figure. Thus, correlation analysis refers to the statistical technique that measures the closeness of the relationship between the variables. Okay, the process of correlation analysis helps us to find out whether the variables under study are related, and if related, the degree of extent of relationship and the direction of covariation between the variables exists, right? And we will see the definitions of correlation first. Okay, some important definitions are there. We will see a few among them. One is an analysis, okay, that deals with the association between the two or more variables, okay, which is called as correlation. This is given by Simpson and Kafka. Okay, according to Alan Chow, correlation as an analysis attempts to determine the degree of relationship between variables. Okay, and the third definition given by A.M. Turtle defined correlation as an analysis of the covariation between two or more variables. Okay, uh, the definition which is given by more okay, comprehensive than these which we have discussed, that is given by Croxton and Cowden. When the relationship of the is of quantitative in nature, the appropriate statistical tool for discovering and measuring the relationship and expressing it in brief formula is known as correlation. Further comprehensive definition is given by W.I. King. According to him, correlation means that between two series or groups of data, there exists some causal connection. Okay, that means cause and effect relationship between the variables. He further states that it is proved true that in a large number of instances, two variables tend always to fluctuate in the same or opposite direction. Okay, if one increases, the other may increase. Okay, or some, that is, if one increases, other increases, they are moving in a same direction, we call it as, okay, they are fluctuating in same direction. We consider that the fact is established and that a relationship exists. The relationship is called correlation. We say that correlation, the relationship which exists between the two variables which are moving in the same direction, is also called as correlation. If we analyze all these definitions, will come to a conclusion that reveals, that states, all these definitions will state that correlation analysis involves the study of two or more variables which have some causal relationship. The variables must have some causal relationship. Means one cause and effect relationship. Okay, uh, uh, one is cause and the other is the effect, right? And the second is correlation, is an analysis of covariation between the variables. Okay, correlation is an analysis of covariation between the variables, right? And it is a statistical technique which measures the degree and direction of covariation between the variables. Okay, it's a statistical technique which measures the degree and direction of covariation between the variables, right? And fourth, it is concerned with the measurement of quantitative relationship between the variables. Okay, it is concerned with the measurement of the quantitative relationship between the variables, and we will see what is causation. Okay, correlation and that is correlation and its cause and effect relationship we will see in this PPT, right? Change in the value of one variable may be often instrumental for the change in the value of other variables, right? But correlation does not mean cause and effect relationship between any variables. To be more clear, it does not reveal which variable is the cause and which variable is the effect, right? Further, correlation analysis does not specify the causal relationship between the variables. High degree of correlation coefficient does not always mean that there is close relationship between the variables studied. Example, the high degree of correlation coefficient between pigs and the production of pig iron does not mean that there is a close relationship between them. Right, pig and pig iron is no way concerned with one another. Okay, there is no cause and effect relationship exists between them. And thus, the presence of correlation between two variables does not necessarily imply the existence of direct causation. Though causation will always result in correlation, okay, the presence of correlation between two variables does not necessarily imply the existence of direct causation, right? The significant degree of correlation coefficient may be due to uh, any one of the combination factors that were discussed here. One is one variable being the cause of other. Okay, one variable being the cause of other. That is, the cause and effect relationship between the variable is often determined on the basis of circumstances case of the case. Okay, and what circumstances? Okay, that relationship, okay, cause and effect relationship between variable have been studied. Example, rainfall causes the growth of agricultural production, but agricultural production does not cause the rainfall. Okay, here rainfall causes the agricultural production. If rainfall is adequate, okay, then there may be a chance to get more agricultural production. But because of agricultural production, there is no rainfall, right? Since rainfall is independent of the agricultural production, it is called an independent variable, and the agricultural production which is subject to the influence of rainfall is called dependent variable, whereas rainfall is it's not because of agricultural production. That's why we call it as independent variable. But agricultural production is because of rainfall, certainly we call it as dependent variable, right? And second one is both the variables may act upon each other. Sometimes we may come across two or more variables which may affect each other. Example, in the case of a high degree of correlation between price and demand of a commodity, it is possible that both variables price and demand may affect each other. For example, the price of gold is falling. Okay, of course, we are not considering here rebel good or some luxurious goods. We are not considering, for example, okay, leave the gold, forget about the gold, we will consider for food item. Okay, if the price of okay, meat going up, the demand for meat may be decrease. Okay, because price is one interrelated. Price is decrease, demand will increase. Okay, because of high demand, sometimes price may increase. Okay, because of scarcity. That's why only the uh, producers are what we call the marketers will sometimes may resort to um, artificial scarcity, create the artificial scarcity, right? They are both the variables may act upon each other. Here, demand and price is one good example because they are affecting one another. In such cases, it is not possible to identify exactly which variable is cause and the other variables. We are not in a position to determine which variable is cause and which variable is the effect, right? And the third one is both the variables being the result of a common cause. Both the variables the result of a common cause. Okay. Often both the variables under study may be closely related to each other because of the fact that they are subject to strong influence of certain other external factors. Okay, some other external factors may also influence them. Okay, to bring some changes in them. For example, and the high degree of correlation between agricultural production and quantity of fertilizer used may be due to outside factors such as rainfall, okay, irrigation facility, quality of seeds used, etc. For example, you take if you consider agricultural produce, okay, and there is only if only rainfall, does the rainfall enough to get adequate production? No, there are many other factors which also influence the agricultural production. Okay, that is not only fertilizer, you need rainfall if you take, okay, and irrigation facilities that were provided. Okay, the quality of seeds also affect the quantity of production. Okay, there is that means it's a result of common cause, right? uh, these external factors act upon both the variables and cause them to respond together. Okay, without water you can't produce the agricultural produce, right? Most essential thing is water. Of course, water only not enough. You need fertilizer, you need seeds. Okay, and moreover quality of the seeds is important to have an adequate produce, right? And the fourth one is chance coincidence. Okay, sometimes the mathematical calculations may give us the high degree of correlation between the variables which are not at all related to each other in any way. This high degree of correlation may be due to sheer coincidence. Okay, while interpreting the correlation coefficient, it is essential to see whether the variable under study are related to one another. Okay, um, one another. If no relationship exists between them, the statistical measure of correlation coefficient calculated is meaningless in those circumstances, right? And this type of correlation is called spurious correlation. Spurious correlation. High degree of correlation between coal production and agricultural production is an example of such spurious correlation. They are not correlated to each other. High degree of correlation may be due to sheer coincidence. While interpreting the correlation coefficient, it is essential to see whether the variable under study are related to one another. Okay, they may be accidentally, they may happen. Okay, no relationship exists between them. The statistical measure of correlation coefficient calculator is meaningless. For example, he has given that coal and agricultural production, they are no way concerned with one another. The high degree of correlation between coal production and agricultural production is an example of such a spurious correlation, right? And lastly, we have high degree of correlation in a small sample due to sampling fluctuations or due to base bias of statistical investigator. High degree of correlation may be obtained for small samples. Okay, because of that is a statistical investigator bias. Okay, sometimes people may who are investigating resort to okay some sort of manipulation. Then we may get a high degree of correlation for those small samples. There may not be any significant relationship between the results obtained for the small samples and that of the variables of universe. For example, the high degree of negative correlation between the heights of fathers and sons may be on account of the study of a small sample of pairs of them. Okay, that may mislead us. Okay, high degree of negative correlation between the heights of fathers and sons might be on account of the study of a small sample of pairs of them. Okay, we can't conclude with those small samples. We should not come to a conclusion by considering the small samples. Okay, and next we have importance of correlation. What is the what? Okay, what are the important of correlation? The study of correlation is extremely useful to government, business, and the consumers for knowing the behavior of various interrelated and interdependent variables. As people, okay, everyone in this world, in this universe, are having scarce resources. Hence, in order to use them optimally, we need to use statistical techniques such as correlation. Some of the specific uses of study of correlation given here. Correlation analysis helps us to understand the relationship between different economic variables, okay, such as demand, price, and supply of commodities, savings, investments, and profits earned, per capita income, and consumption patterns, exports and imports. Okay, this type of analytical study helps the government and manufacturer to plan the production in accordance with the circumstances prevailing in the economy. Government wants to give good administration to its citizens, right? In the same way, manufacturer wants to make profits. If we know the pulse of the consumer, okay, certainly he can produce the uh, products that will meet the okay objective or requirements of the consumer. Okay. Hence he needs to know all these facts. Okay, they need to understand the relationship between the consumption patterns and income of the people, right? Second one is correlation analysis helps the business management in finding out the direction and extent of relationship between the variables which affect the smooth functioning of the organizations. Right? Example, with the help of correlation technique, the business executive can find out a degree of relationship between advertisement expenditure and amount of sales generated. If you spend more, if you get more sales, then suddenly you think that the advertisement has a significant effect on the improving the sales, right? They can also find out the functional relationship between costs and the sales prices. Okay, costs and sales prices. If you are not able to control the costs, okay, certainly sales price will increase. That will okay result in decrease of the sales. Okay, this sort of functional relationship reduces the impact, okay, impact of uncertainty in decision making and replaces the guesswork with scientific methods. Of course, we may sometimes use guesswork to anticipate the things that will come in future. But scientific calculation, scientific methods such as correlation required, this will remove the uncertainty. Okay, reduces the uncertainty in decision making and getting more fruitful results. The predictions based on the statistical measure of correlation would be more reliable than the estimate based on intuition. Okay, maybe intuition sometimes may be correct, but it may not be correct always. But that is not more reliable. But whereas statistical measure of correlation would be more reliable than intuitions, right? Mm, okay, of course, these are also maybe predictions, but they are based on some scientific evidences, right? And third is and the accuracy of relationship between the variables derived on the basis of unscientific or crude methods can be verified and tested for significance with the help of correlation technique. Okay, accuracy of relationship between the variables derived on the basis of unscientific crude methods. Sometimes if we may use some different methods, they may be unscientific and they are crude. Okay, we want to verify the significance, whether they are significant or not they in decision making, and that will be okay done by correlation techniques, right? Correlation coefficient is a pure number with the help of which the relationship between the variables whose values are expressed in different units can be studied and analyzed without any difficulty and confusion, right? It's a pure number. With the help of this number, okay, relationship between the variables whose values are expressed in different units can be studied and analyzed without any confusion, okay, difficulty. And fifth one is correlation analysis helps us not only to understand the economic behavior, but also to locate the critically important variables on which other variables depend. Okay, we will in order to locate the independent variables, that means okay, thus the disturbing forces can be identified and made neutral with the help of certain other stabilizing forces. If you know which is responsible for that happening, you may control it. Okay, that will be in those cases also it is useful. And the last one, that is statistical techniques such as regression, ratio variation depends heavily on the measure of correlation, right? And now in the slide will show the types of correlation. We'll discuss how many types of correlation are there. On the basis of the nature of relationship between the variables, correlation may be classified into three categories. Okay, that is positive and negative correlation, simple and partial and multiple correlation, linear and non-linear correlation. First we'll see is positive and negative correlation. What is positive and negative correlation? Positive and negative correlation between two variables is identified with reference to the degree and direction of change that takes place in the variables. Okay, if values of both the variables change in the same direction, means the okay, if the price increases, demand for that gold increases. For example, you see prestigious goods. Okay, demand for diamonds. If the price of the diamond increases, demand for those items will increase. In okay, they are moving in the same direction. Example, if the value of both the variables change in the same direction, correlation is said to be positive. Okay, if the increase or decrease in the value of the variables is accompanied by the increase or decrease in the value. For example, if the price of the gold decreases, people think that further decreases, speculation may stop them to buy more. Okay, the price increases, they thought that price further increases, they may think that the price further increases, hence they may buy. The demand for the gold increases. If price decreases, demand decreases, price increases, demand increases. Okay, this is called positive correlation. The okay relationship between the two variables. Okay, demand for gold and price, right? He has given price of commodity and supply of commodity. One example here, 20, 24, 30, 36, 40 are the prices of the commodities in rupees. Supply, if 20 rupees, he demanded 30 kgs. When 24, he demanded 40. When 30, he demanded 44. When 36, he demanded 50. And when 40, he demanded 74. That means as the price increases, demand for that commodity also increasing. Okay, supply generally people demand. We can explain the same with the help of supply curve. Demand curve generally for some goods, prestigious goods, there is an exemption that will show the positive correlation. Whereas supplier wants to make profits, hence they want to supply more when the price of the commodity increases. They want to supply less when the price of the commodity decreases in order to make a lot of profits, and moreover and create artificial scarcity in the market and raise the demand for the goods, right? If price of commodity 40, supply of commodity is 25, 30, price of the commodity generally producers do not restore such kind of things because they don't want to supply more at lower prices. It applies to demand. Okay. Next, on the other hand, if the decrease in the value of variable is accompanied by the increase in the value of other variable, or increase in the value of one variable is followed by the decrease in the value of other variable, the correlation is said to be negative. Means one is moving in forward direction and the other is moving in the downward direction. That means increase of one variable causes decrease in another variable. For example, price of the commodity, demand for the commodity. Okay, price of the commodity 10 rupees, demand for the commodity 20. When price is 15, demand 15. When price is 20, demand 11, and further decreasing. They are moving. Okay, and the price increasing, demand for the commodity decreasing. They are moving in both are moving in opposite direction. Okay, then which is called as negative. Okay, when the price of the commodity further increases, okay, demand price of the commodity decreasing, demand increase, quantity demanded increases. That is all. They are also moving in opposite only. That's why this type of correlation is called as negative correlation. And the second type of correlation is simple, partial, and multiple correlation. Simple, partial, and multiple correlation is identified with reference to the number of variables studied. Okay, if the relationship is calculated between two variables only, it is called simple correlation. Okay, when we are studying two variables, then it is called simple correlation. And that correlation between demand and price of the commodity is one good example for that. And on the other hand, the relationship calculated, okay, for more than two variables is referred to either multiple or partial correlation. But in case of multiple correlation, the relationship among all the variables more than two is studied simultaneously. Okay, and that is study of relationship between agricultural production, rainfall, fertilizers, etc. On the other hand, in case of partial correlation, the relationship between agricultural production and rainfall is studied, and the impact of fertilizer is ignored or kept constant. Okay, there is no chance because of okay, we are unable to study the same impact of all the factors simultaneously, all variables. We ignore the impact of some variables. Okay, we'll consider only two in case of partial correlation. Whereas multiple and simple correlation, we will study the impact of all the variables simultaneously. Right. Next, third one type of correlation is a linear and non-linear or curvilinear correlation. Okay, linear and non-linear correlation is identified with reference to the amount or rate of change in the value of variables. If the amount or rate of change in one variable is accompanied by the same amount or rate of change in the variable other variable is known as non-linear correlation. Okay, amount rate of change in the values of variable. Okay, the rate of change of variable is accompanied by the same amount of rate of change in other variable, means that they are moving in the same pattern. Okay, example as given that x is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 10, 60. 10, okay, when 10 first item, y is 25. When 10 becomes 20, y becomes 50. When x becomes 30, y becomes 75. In the same proportion they are moving. That is called as linear relationship that will exist between the given variables. On the other hand, if the amount of rate of change in one variable is not accompanied by the same amount of rate of change in the other variable, both are not in the same rate of change they are moving, then correlation is said to be non-linear. Okay, non-linear, that means that maybe curvy form. Okay, it can be in the same manner that can be. Okay, we'll consider one example for this. X values are 20, 24, 44, 68, 90, 112. Y values are 100, 110, 120, 180, 196, 240. Okay, they are moving in the same direction, but they are not in the same rate or same proportion rate of change. Hence, there is a curve. Okay, one is moving slowly and the other moving fastly. In case of linear correlation, data if plotted on a graph paper gives a straight line. We'll see in the PPT. Okay, that is a positive linear and negative linear relationship. How that will exist? Okay, in a linear form. Okay, in a straight line. Okay, that is positive when both are increasing. That is the units which are taken on the x-axis and as well as units which are taken on the y-axis are increasing. Whereas in case of a negative linear relationship, there one is increasing than the other is decreasing. Okay, that is like a demand curve. Whereas in case of positive, that is like a supply curve. Okay, positive curvilinear relationship. They are not the above two lines linear. They are moving in the rate of change of one variable is is accompanied by the same rate of change. Whereas curvilinear form, of course, maybe positive and negative. This is also in positive also one variable rate of change in one variable is not accompanied by the rate of change in other variable. Okay, that is moving in different. That may be uh, rate of change is very may be high than the earlier one, right? And negative also the rate of change of one variable is may not be accompanied with the other. Both are in the curvy form only. Okay, in our daily life we are concerned with the variables, okay, that have non-linear relationship. Since the statistical measure to study the non-linear relations are far more complicated, right? We generally assume the presence of linear relationship between the variables, right? And degree of correlation. We'll see degree of correlation. Uh, the extent of relationship between the variables is calculated with the help of a statistical technique known as correlation coefficient. The extent of relationship between the variables is calculated with the help of statistical technique known as correlation coefficient. According to the formula given by Carl Pearson, okay, correlation coefficient always varies between +1 plus or -1. Okay, while the algebraic sign plus indicates the positive relationship between the variables, and whereas the negative sign denotes the negative relationship. If no relationship exists between the variables under study, correlation coefficient will be 0, right? If there is a positive sign that indicates positive relationship exists between the variables, if it is negative sign, negative relationship exists. Okay, if it is 0, no correlation exists among the variables under study. While positive one denotes the perfect positive correlation. Perfect positive correlation. Okay, and minus one denotes the perfect negative correlation. Okay, they move in opposite direction. If the if the correlation coefficient is closer to 1, we may say there is higher degree of positive correlation, and okay, on the other hand, if correlation coefficient is near to -1, we may say that is higher degree of negative correlation, as it moves between the continuum of +1 and -1. Okay, it is reaching near to +1, higher degree of positive correlation. It is reaching -1, higher degree of negative correlation will exist, right? And correlation is said to be perfectly positive if an increase or decrease in one variable is accompanied by the same amount of rate of increase or decrease in the other variable. Okay, if the impact of one variable having the same change or impact of change in the other variable, then we say that perfectly positive. Okay, on the other hand, correlation is said to be perfectly negative. Okay, uh, perfectly negative, and then uh, perfectly negative if an increase decrease in one variable is accompanied by the same amount of rate of change in the other variable in the reverse direction. Okay, both are when they are moving in the same amount of change in the same direction, then we say that positively correlated, perfectly positively correlated. And if they are moving in the opposite direction but they are in the same amount of change accompanied with each variable, then we call it as negative. Okay, correlation exists among the variables, right? In the case of positive or negative correlation, the change in one variable need not be accompanied by the change in the other variable in a definite ratio. There is no hard and fast rule regarding the change in one variable that should cause the change in other variable, right? Of course, an approximate degree of correlation between the variables can be given in a table form. If you see the PPT, you will come to know the degree of correlation, how it is. Okay, absence of correlation will be indicated in case of positive 0, in case of negative also 0. Absence of, there is no correlation between the variables, then the positive and negative correlation can be shown as 0. Of course, there is no relationship, that is, the relationship does not exist between the variables, hence we say the relationship, correlation relationship. Okay, correlation is 0, that may be positive or negative, that cannot be existent, hence we put that 0. Okay, and a very low degree of correlation, that may be insignificant, we call it as insignificant, very low, that is 0 to plus 0.25 in case of positive correlation, and 0 to minus 0.25 in case of negative correlation. This is minute, very low, okay, degree of correlation. It can be said as insignificant, right? And third one is low degree of correlation. This is between plus 0.25 to plus 0.5 in case of positive correlation. The range is plus 0.25 to plus 50. Okay, next plus 0.50. Next, in case of negative correlation, minus 0.25 to minus 0.50. Okay, negative and positive correlation, where low degree of correlation, we call it, I use the correlation value, say, okay, in between these. And if moderate degree of correlation, plus 0.5 to plus 0.75 in case of positive correlation, whereas in case of negative correlation, minus 0.5 to 0.75. Okay, right. Next, high degree of correlation. Okay, if there is a high degree of correlation, plus 0.75 to 1 in case of positive correlation. In case of negative correlation, minus 0.75 to minus 1. Okay, 1.00 is nothing but 1. Right. This means there is a high degree of correlation. We conclude that if there is a high degree of correlation, the value positive, in case of positive correlation, the value ranges from 0.75 to 1. In case of negative correlation, the value ranges from 0.75 minus 0.75 to minus 1. Okay, in case of perfect correlation, okay, there exists perfect correlation among the variables. If it is positive, you will get the plus 1. Then you can say that there is a perfect positive correlation. If it is minus 1, you say that the correlation among the variables is negative, perfectly negative, right? With this, we have concluded the okay correlation topic, and thank you.